Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another question and answer video. This is number 27 in the ongoing series in which you all ask questions and I provide the answers. Today I'm working on an illustration for a future project which will have to remain a mystery. It's a little too early to talk about what this is for, but rest assured you will find out in the months ahead. For now, let's go ahead and jump into the first question, this one coming from Nicholas Flanders. Have you ever looked at a drawing you just did and been extremely proud of yourself? Then you look back at it a month, a week, or even a couple of hours later and you spot some mistakes or you just aren't proud of that drawing. Absolutely, that happens all the time, and I think it's a natural part of the drawing process. You kind of, you're too close to it maybe while you're working on it. And I suppose it can go both ways. Sometimes you can feel very frustrated and think that a drawing is no good, and then you go away and come back, and it doesn't look quite as bad. I suppose that's a rarer situation, but more often you see the mistakes that were not clear to you while you were working on it. In any case, you should, I would say, embrace the fact that that's going to happen. Almost inevitably, and you'd be glad that you have fresh eyes. You can come back and see things that you didn't see before. Of course, it's frustrating when you were like, man, I just did the best drawing ever. I'll go have lunch and come back, and then you're like, oh, no, I hate it. So it is. It's kind of a weird thing. You'd think that your perception of a drawing is locked in stone, but seemingly it is not. You do. That happens to me pretty much every time. So at the very least, I can tell you I sympathize. And rest assured, it's not just something that happens with beginning artists. It happens with pretty much every artist from the beginner all the way up to, I'll bet Monet came back to paintings and he's like, oh, it doesn't look like what it looked like before. In any case, let's move on to the next one. This one from Tyann Hafar. How long did it take you to create the Realism Challenge book? Well, I'll grab a copy of it so I can talk a little bit about the process of creating this book. I began in the fall of, I think it was 2014, and it went clear through to the winter. I remember, in the very snowy months of January, February, getting into the final illustration. So it's like 5 or 6 months that I put into that project. One thing that was sort of interesting about it is that, for example, here's the one on mushrooms, where I show the photo of the mushrooms, and then, of course, you come over here and you see the Realism Challenge, the classic side-by-side with the real mushrooms versus the illustration. As always, the illustration always a little paler somehow than the original object. But what was kind of tricky was that I would do, say, for example, this pencil drawing. I had to stop and scan that in and make sure that I saved it and backed it up and so forth, because I would go back on top of that to create the second drawing. So in a way, I'm obliterating the first drawing as I go, and I had to be very careful to scan it in at the right times. Sometimes I would scan it in at multiple times and then decide later on, which one is actually going to be the step that I use in the final book. But it was, in that sense, a little different from some of my other step-by-step books in the sense that each step obliterated the previous step. That is to say, the art changed forever and could not be undone, so that I really had to feel quite sure about, scanning it in and saying, all right, this is it. No tweaking that, no going back. So anyway, to answer the question, about 5 or 6 months all told that it took me to do that book. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question here from Sarah Razel Siegelman. Is starting a YouTube art channel worth it? I would say absolutely it's worth it. Of course, you have to be realistic about what's possible in terms of, numbers of subscribers and numbers of views. But I don't think you should necessarily regard starting your own YouTube channel of any kind as sort of a numbers game only. You know, what happens when you make a video, and, you know, I learned this myself. You put a video out there, and it begins to be seen by people. You can't anticipate who's going to see it, right? And so even a video with a small number of views might be seen eventually by some person who really connects with it, and then that person leaves a comment or reaches out to you, and it leads to other things. So, yeah, I would sort of encourage you, not just YouTube, but anything in terms of putting your work out there on the internet, I would say go for it and hold steady. Don't get disappointed by, like, oh man, this thing has only had 5 views after, you know, 2 months or whatever. I guess that means I better pull the plug and give up. And I would say, no, don't. Keep at it. You really never know what's going to take off. And as I said, you never know who is going to see this thing and what that might lead to. So let's go on to question number 4 from Pighead Incorporated, I believe. Number 4, how do you decide what perspective you want a drawing to be in? Well, I chose this with the idea of specifically showing work and talking about the perspective choices. This is Brodys Ghost 5, and in fact I will be bringing it out again to answer another question later on. But so here we have the opening scene where Brody is standing looking in this window. It is pretty much a classic one-point perspective, which is to say all these lines would recede to a single point right around there in the distance. And, you know, basically I didn't begin by saying, okay, let's do a one-point perspective. No, I said, let's have a scene in which Brody is looking into this window. And it could have been done in a lot of different ways. For example, you know, the window could be this way and Brody's sort of peering into it. I came up with this idea, let's do it from the side. So we see his face and we see the lights illuminating him. And as I thought about that scene, the one-point perspective just presented itself as the natural type of perspective to use. Now on the next page, conveniently, we have a picture that is in fact a two-point perspective, maybe not so clear. You have to sort of think about the fact that this line and say the top of this square over here, I don't know if you can see this, but these lines would distantly recede to a point way over off on the right. And then here, a little more clearly, you can see a second point. So that makes this, these may be connecting somewhere over there. That is a two-point perspective. And again, it sort of comes from what I wanted to do. I wanted us to see Brody looking at this TV so that we could eventually zoom in on it. And I just felt that the two-point perspective was the way to put that across most elegantly. Now here on the very next page we have, I suppose it's a bit of a stretch, but this is kind of a three-point perspective. Definitely you can see that this line and this line, these are all these are going to connect, eventually converge on what I call the subterranean point in the middle of the earth that goes down below. This is, I'll be honest with you, these are not sort of receding toward a distant line the way I've drawn them, but I suppose you could make an argument that they ought to be receding toward a point, and then these lines going off here also ought to be receding towards a point way off in that distance, making this a three-point, the classic three-point perspective, the aerial view. And again, why did I do that? I think maybe just to give us a bit of a breather from the up-close points of view that we had over here. Maybe it is a bit of an establishing shot. We've cut from this place. This establishes this location of him looking in the window. We've cut to a new location where he's making a phone call. So it's sort of a standard thing to pull back a little and give us the scene so we understand where he is. It didn't necessarily have to be an aerial view. I think I chose it just to sort of spice things up. I suppose when you get an aerial view, you give the reader a sort of godlike perspective from way up high, and then your character looks a little ant-like and diminutive. I'm sort of just making this up as I go, but maybe I wanted to show that Brody was in a tight spot here by making him look so small. Who knows? More likely it was just like I said, breaking things up. So there's the three different points of perspective, the three different perspective systems, and why I chose them. I suppose the takeaway to sum things up is that, it doesn't, for me, begin with, boy, I want to do a perspective drawing. It's more like, what is the point of view? What's the best point of view? And that has to do with storytelling. What you want the reader to see, what gives the reader clarity in terms of what is happening in this frame. It's a huge topic, and it makes me think, let's save that for another video and go into it in greater depth. But thank you so much, Pighead Incorporated. You're not a pighead to me. That was a very good question. And here we have Ishin Thao. And the question is, spoilers for the next upcoming Mastering Manga Part 3. I love this because it says spoilers. It's like, are you going to give away the ending of Mastering Manga Book 3? Don't give it away, Crilly. The twist ending. It is an instructional book, so in that way, I don't know if I would... do we use the word spoilers in this situation? Maybe. Hang on, I've prepared a sort of a graphic that I'm going to splice in here to give you a little sneak peek at Mastering Manga Book 3. So, to sort of summarize what you're seeing there, that is actually not the finished thing. You saw sort of like little rectangular boxes around everything. We're in the early stages of putting the book together. This is the sort of rough mock-up version, the finished one. Those of you who know the book know that, generally speaking, those types of illustrations don't have square boxes around them. Hopefully they'll actually be larger in the finished book, if indeed they end up side by side like that. But I thought that was sort of a fun little one showing the difference between, stiff-looking postures and more relaxed-looking postures. And there will be a comparable one using female characters in the book. But, the good news is the book is completely finished now. I shouldn't say completely. I haven't done the front cover art. But the interiors are completely finished, and I don't have a publication date, but I'm going to guess very late this year, 2016, at the earliest. Maybe it goes into 2017. I will be letting you guys know. But of course we have not one but two books coming before that. One of them is called The Drawing Lesson, which I spoke about in the previous Q&A video. And the other is one that, sadly, I can't quite talk about yet. But I will definitely be revealing that one very soon indeed, and hyping it like crazy. You know me, I never shy away from letting people know about my books. Now it's time to move on to number 6 from Rebecca Rem. How far do you plan ahead for your videos? Is it like you plan out videos for a month, or is it more like a weekly thing? It is very much definitely a weekly thing. It's not, I don't never sit down and plan out an entire month's worth of videos, pretty much never, except for, I don't know, maybe when I do one of the no time-lapse series where there's 4 in a row. That would be the only time where I know, okay, this month all of these videos are going to be like that. It is very much week by week, and very often the videos are kind of in reaction to the previous videos, so that if I do, like a chibi video, I don't want to do another chibi video right away. If I do a realistic video, the next week will probably not be realistic, and so I'm always sort of pivoting away from whatever the last thing was that I did. The goal always with this channel is variety, and not to get too repetitious. By the way, folks, I was going to say, this question and answer video is basically around 3 months. I'm doing this 3 months after the last one, and that has kind of been the standard, loosely planned to do them once every 3 months. But I was thinking, I really enjoy these. I feel like the viewers enjoy them. I might consider doing them every other month. Let me know what you think of that as a schedule for the Q&A videos. Oh, just to let you know what I'm doing right now, I'm using a white Prismacolor, my trusty white Prismacolor, to create a sort of a rain effect here on top of the darker bluish tones beneath. And yeah, definitely for something like this, I pull out the ruler. I'm not going to try to make those lines, super straight lines by hand. Let us continue. This one, quite an interesting question. From Splinter for Sale, what do you think of Bob Ross? So this is, yeah, I've never really been asked this question before, I don't think. It's, you know, it's interesting because people have sort of likened me to Bob Ross. I don't know if everybody watching this knows who Bob Ross is. Maybe I'll splice in a graphic showing who Bob Ross is, and maybe more importantly, showing his style of painting. Let's do that. I'll prepare that and splice it in right here. So yeah, there's Bob Ross, who I think would be arguably the most famous TV, you know, art-related person on TV, who had his own show and he was teaching people how to paint. People have said, Mark, you are the the Bob Ross of manga, or the Bob Ross of YouTube, or something like that. And I can certainly see where the comparison can be made because of how he would paint and talk while he was painting. And I'm pretty sure it was not, you know, recorded separately. I think he was speaking as he painted, and so there is a similarity there in terms of our approach. I have to say I never did actually watch that show, not even one episode all the way through. I suppose I've seen little clips here and there over the years, but you know, his style of landscape painting is not necessarily my favorite type of oil painting. The colors are quite bright, and so not necessarily my go-to artist in terms of landscape painting. But I would say that I think he's, you know, he was a very important guy in terms of bringing art instruction to the ordinary person in their own home by way of this TV show. There was something about his personality, clearly, that connected with people, the sort of gentle way that he spoke. And so I am an admirer of him in that sense. Maybe not so much his oil painting, but what he did in terms of, it seems to me, kind of breaking down a wall and getting art instruction out of the, you know, confines of classroom places where you have to pay a lot of money and so forth, and you know, maybe reviving people's interest in art. I feel like that's another similarity maybe, and I hear from people who will say, boy, you know, I stopped drawing for years. I'd always loved it when I was younger, and then I saw one of your videos and I've started getting into it again, and I think, wow, boy, I'm so lucky to be able to have that kind of an effect on someone by way of these YouTube videos. And so yeah, hopefully that covers my thoughts on Bob Ross. One thing that I get a little confused about in terms of the reaction to Bob Ross and the way that he is referenced on the internet, it's hard for me to tell sometimes if people are mocking him versus genuinely admiring him. It's a little, you know, in the internet age and in just the style of humor of recent decades, it's hard to tell sometimes if someone is saying they like somebody, but they mean it ironically. Maybe it's a little of both. Who knows? It'd be interesting to see if there are any comments on the, you know, on that topic of Bob Ross. I do feel over time that he's kind of won everyone over, and that people do genuinely like Bob Ross. It'll be interesting to hear what people have to say. But let's move on now to number 8 from Ciaridor. How do you get your audience attached emotionally to a character? Well, this is a huge question and maybe beyond the scope of a Q&A video, but I wanted to attempt it anyway. And you know what I'm going to do at this point is switch to my my beloved white gouache. Hang on just a second. Okay, so I'm here with my beloved white gouache. And I feel like every time now I should point out that I have diluted it with water. I do hear from people who didn't realize that, and I feel a little bad if people bought a tube of gouache, tried to use it straight out of the tube, and said, "Wow, this is like painting with paste or something." Well, it does indeed need to be diluted, just like watercolors. In any case, I wanted to answer that question about how do you get your audience to be attached emotionally to a character. One thing that I've learned over the years is that in a funny way, you almost need to have your main character suffer a little. You don't need to, but one technique for getting your readers to care about the main character is to show them suffering a little, and then the person feels bad for them. For example, with Brodys Ghost, at the beginning of the story, I show him, having to go out and play guitar on the street for handouts. And so we sort of get a sense of him having a fairly rough life. But even more important is the conversation after that, in which he reveals that he has split up with his girlfriend, or was, it seems, dumped by her quite a while ago, and we just see how broken up he is and how that has led to him letting his life fall apart. And so that the whole point of that, of introducing that, was to get us to sympathize a little, or at least to see that Brody has an emotional journey to go on, hopefully from low to high. I suppose the message is that if you begin a story with a protagonist who is, rich and everything's going great and they're just leaping from triumph to triumph and nothing is wrong, I don't know if the reader's going to identify so much with that character. One way of getting people to, and it doesn't have to be necessarily poverty or terrible adversity. At the beginning of The Incredibles, we see Bob Parr working at this insurance agency in which his life is incredibly boring. We know that he's capable of amazing stuff. And so there's this long scene of him suffering, really, through the boredom of his job and then being picked apart by his boss. I think all of that stuff is to get us to feel sympathy for Bob Parr. And say, God, poor guy. He's like Superman, but he's stuck in this terrible life. All of that, I think, is part of getting us to care about this character and hoping to see them break out of, their difficult circumstances. So that's one. That's not the only technique. I'm sure there are other ways of getting your readers to feel emotionally attached to a character, but that's certainly one of the big ones. One worth considering. Let's go now to question number 9 from GM51. What is the page size of Brodys Ghost's original art? Well, hang on, and we will measure it. Okay, so here is an original double-page spread from Brodys Ghost. Here is the actual way it turned out in the book, so you can see the difference in size. The original larger, as normally is the case, but not vastly larger. What does that look like to you? Maybe 80%? Something like that? I should remember. I think I reduced it by 79% back when I was working on it, but I have kind of forgotten what the actual measurements are, so I thought I would do that live here on the video. Looks like about 8.5 inches from top to bottom. That comes out to, ta-da, a little under 22 centimeters. Centimeters from side to side, it is a little under 15, which comes out to a little under 6. So kind of arbitrary size. I came up with it really just to have 2 fit on one of these 14-inch wide sheets of Bristol board. People maybe believe that there is one standard comic book size. There may be one traditional one from the old days of superheroes and Batman comics and so forth. But these days, it's not the size, it's the dimensions. And if you take a ruler and measure diagonally across from one point to the other, you can add points and keep expanding. I don't know if this makes sense. You can add a point, you can keep going further out as long as it follows that diagonal, and then make a new square that's bigger and bigger and bigger, as long as it's the exact same shape, the proportions, then you're all right. Especially these days, people are working digitally. People don't even know what the original size is. It's all about the shape. And how do you determine the shape? Well, this might surprise some of you, but go to the store or go to your library, get a copy of the book, the type of format that you want to do your series in, and base it off of that. If you buy a manga, if you want yours to be published in a certain way, go home, measure it, measure the actual art size, not necessarily the page size, the image size, and then base your original art on that. You'll be fine. The main thing is not to make anything that's too narrow, top to bottom, or too wide. And I think it is, people sort of have this idea that, oh my goodness, before I get started, I better figure out the official, is it 9 inches tall? Come, somebody tell me the exact thing. I don't think that stuff applies anymore. Hang on, I'm going to refocus, get back to the artwork. Okay, so to sum things up, don't worry about the measurements, just the proportions when it comes to determining the size of your original art. But let's move on now to the final ones of these sort of more serious-minded questions. Number 10, do you think that artists should be pushed to have one definitive style? This question from Dark Lord Khan. I think anyone who's watched my videos for a while, you know what I'm about to say. No, I don't think that artists should be pushed into any thing that doesn't come naturally to them, that they don't want to do. I'm a big believer in the freedom of the artist, and I just don't like this idea of there being rigid rules and forcing people to do one thing, do it my way instead of the way that seems natural to you. That being said, certain people do have a natural inclination to have one particular style, and it can be helpful. It becomes instantly recognizable. I would say that, like The Simpsons is a good example. Matt Groening's style is just unmistakable, so that when you see Futurama, you just immediately say, this is by the guy who did The Simpsons. Look, you can see it a mile away. And generally speaking, the more successful people in graphics do, I think, have maybe one observable style. Now, look at me. I don't. My style is all over the place. I keep changing from one moment to the next. Every illustration I do, seemingly, is in a slightly different style from the one I did before. But that's what comes naturally to me. That's what makes art exciting to me, that constant change. And I suppose from a certain point of view, someone might argue, boy, you could have gone farther in your career if you had settled on a single style. And, that may be the case, but how miserable would I have been locking myself into a style when I really longed to do a wide variety of styles. So, yeah, absolutely. If you're asking me, I say do what comes naturally. If working in one particular style is your instinct, then by all means, that's what you do. But don't try to push yourself into a single style if that doesn't come naturally to you. Well, it is time now to move on to everybody's favorite part of the question and answer video, and that is, of course, the lightning round. And I am going to try to continue working a little bit on my little gouache phase here, but once I jump into these lightning round questions, things tend to go pretty quickly. So here's what I'm going to do, actually. I'll take a little break here and do a little more gouache so that this image will be a little more worked out. And then we'll come back and we'll get into those lightning round questions. Okay, well, I think I got enough of the white gouache part done. I'm going to be coming in here and doing a a few more rain lines as I finally get to these lightning round questions. So let's begin with this one from Green Zeta. Does it matter if someone is left-handed or right-handed to draw well? I say no. I think it's completely unrelated. In fact, as you know, sometimes people lose the use of their hands. So they begin drawing with, clenching it with their teeth, or you teach themselves to draw with a foot or something. It really, it's not so much about your hand. It's more about your eyes and your, years of training, really, or your brain, the brain behind the eyes. This is the lightning round, though, so I better keep moving. Carolyn Turing asks, who's your favorite character from Star Wars? Well, it always, for me, comes back to Alec Guinness and his portrayal of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and that's why I still love the first movie, because it's got more Alec Guinness in it than any of the others. Let's move on, though, to the next one, number 3, from Diane Perez Bolanos. Have you ever thought of going to an anime convention and have a booth called The Blushies and Precious White Gouache? It's beloved white gouache, Diana. Beloved. Let's get the terminology right. I don't know. Do you mean that I would be selling gouache and then also selling blushies? I'm not sure how that works. But as a matter of fact, I have been invited to an anime convention in Dallas, Texas this coming August. Still a ways off, but I will definitely be saying more about that in the months ahead, certainly as we get closer to the summer. So let's go ahead and take on question number 4 from Mars Farnham. Have you ever let your hair grow long enough for tying it on a ponytail, or in a ponytail, I guess, is what was meant. And you know what? I've decided to actually show an embarrassing old photo to answer that question. All right, well, this is an old photo from a trip that I took to Europe back when I was in college. And as you can see, some pretty shaggy long hair there. People might even call it a mullet. I would argue against that, but maybe they're right. This was the beginning. It got longer than that, and I suppose it could have been tied into a tiny, tiny little ponytail, but eventually I realized how horrible I look with long hair. Look what I wrote here. I'm leaving. Where's the parade? What a dork I am, making my own old scrapbook with a little commentary beneath each photo. But let us hasten on to the next question. Okay, question number 5 from Huge Sign 667. What's your favorite cheese? And from the spelling, I'm thinking maybe a question from England or the UK somewhere. In any case, my answer is this. I like aged cheddar. I want it to be at least 1 year old, maybe even 2 years aged. But actually, I like all kinds of cheeses. Brie, big fan of fresh mozzarella. Not so crazy about blue cheese. Why am I taking this question so seriously? Does anyone really care about your preferences? And cheese, Crilly, let's go on. To Mr. UFC Law, or is it Mr. UF Claw? The question is, would you like to meet the Emperor of Japan and draw a portrait of him? Yes, I would be delighted to meet the Emperor of Japan. It would be a thrill. Of course, I would be incredibly nervous about drawing a portrait of him, but hey, I'd give it a try. As luck has it, my wife's father, my father-in-law in Japan, has actually met the emperor in person, was given an award for his service to the nation as a doctor there, and so yeah, I have not met the emperor, but I've met someone who met the emperor. How about that? Let's move on to number 7, and that is from Strawberry. If you could choose to live in any anime, which one would you choose to live in and why? I think it would be cool to live in the world of Fullmetal Alchemist. It seems like there's a lot to explore there. But I have to go back to my old tried and true Totoro, just because I want to ride the cat bus. Can you just imagine how awesome that would be to ride on the cat bus? I shouldn't have said it. I won't rest until I'm able to do it somehow. This one from Johnny Johnson. What is your go-to gas station snack? I love the idea that there are gas station snacks. I had never heard of that term before, but oops, things dropping. flying all over the place. Once I heard that, I said, yes, that there is a such thing as a gas station snack, a certain type of snack that you find at gas stations. I think for me, it's trail mix. Although I do love the popcorn that comes in bags. Be careful though, because read the saturated fat info. I remember looking at one of those and it was like, half a bag contains 95% of your daily allowance of saturated fat. You try to eat half of one of those bags. Come on. You're not going to just eat half. Let's move on to this one from J. King. If you were approached by an anime company and they offered to turn Brodys Ghost into an anime on the condition that you quit using the beloved white gouache, what would you say? I love that in the world of markcrilley, a Sophie's choice, impossible dilemma of a question involves white gouache. Look, if they're going to turn Brodys Ghost into an anime, I can live without the white gouache. I would start using white watercolor in its place. So, how do you like that? I get to have it both ways. Finally, question number 10. Couldn't end it with anything other than this one from Jakob Eubank. Do you think that toast will one day rise up against the other breakfast foods? Jacob, you don't know toast the way I do. Toast would never rise up against its brethren that way. No, they would be in solidarity with one another. They would join, they would unite against the common enemy of lunch foods and dinner foods. And destroy both of those meals so that people will no longer consider skipping breakfast. Well, it is time clearly for me to thank you all for watching this video, also for me to lay down this pencil. Thank you so much for watching it. I hope you had fun with it. I certainly did. And thanks so much to all of you who asked the questions, making it possible for me to answer them. But let's go ahead and wind this one down. I do hope you will enjoy the next one I do, because I will be back with another one real soon.